questions you might have, or even misconceptions that might be out there as well. I do handle a lot of emails, but there's so many times where I'm like, let's just get on the phone because I think it's so much easier to go through with conversation. So please ask away. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I'm going to go through some like maybe somewhat boring stuff. I don't know, but I just think it's good to kind of set the foundation and then we can jump into any questions that may pop up or save them for the end, either way. So I'm just going to begin with what is accreditation? And accreditation is a way to help assess, in our case, we do programmatic accreditation, but of course there's institutional accreditation, there's different services that are accredited, but they're assessing that program against a set established standards and just assuring that that program is meeting those standards. And the standards specific to exercise science and exercise physiology have been developed by professionals involved in the discipline. And they're intended to reflect what a person needs to be able to function successfully in that profession. So, ideally, I think we would all agree that when we're working with our students, that is our main objective and goal is to prepare them to be able to go out into the world and serve others and serve the profession. So in terms of accreditation for health related accreditations, it's important for the public so that they can understand and feel comfortable that the care that they're being provided is a do no harm. And so they want to have certain standards established. We look at accreditation, and there's a slide that is going to come up a little bit later, but I call it like a link in the fence of getting to that quality care that's being provided. So along with certifications or licensures in other, parallel industries, it's a tool to show and help prepare that workforce so that make sure that they are qualified to be delivering the services that they are. And I'm sure you guys can all agree that there has been times, I think, even if you look at the history of the profession, that there's a lot of people out there calling themselves, an exercise specialist or an exercise physiologist or a personal trainer, all those things that really are not qualified. And so this is one of the steps that we're trying to take to help ensure others that you do have qualified individuals in this industry. Oops, I went into there we go. Okay, so I want to explain the relationship between the COAES and the organization called the Commission on Accreditation of Allied Health Education Programs. So you might have heard that being called CAAHEP. CAAHEP is the actual accreditor that the COAES works with. They are the largest accreditor of allied health education programs in the US. So they have about 25 what we call COAs. So I'm the executive director for the COA for the exercise sciences. And COA stands for Committee on Accreditation. So CAAHEP is the accreditor, but they work with committees who do the actual work of assessing programs within their discipline. So those 25 committees on accreditation have 31 different professions which are represented at the CAAHEP level. So I would say, so when I started with serving as that sponsorship role back when I was with the Institute, the Cooper Institute, this was, I time it by my pregnancies. And it was before I had my son, who is 16 now. So we have been in this paired with CAAHEP for, I think it's got to be 16 years because he's 16. But the reason why, when the different sponsoring organizations got together and said, hey, this is something that we think is really important for our industry, when they were seeking what is an accrediting body that we want to align with, the reason why they selected CAAHEP is because they are the largest accreditor of allied health education programs. And so they wanted to organize and align with an organization that was serving parallel health professions. And one of the big reasons behind that is, first of all, they would more likely understand our industry and our profession and our educational programs, but also so that others out in the world could see that we are aligned with the common practices of those parallel industries to us. So for instance, there's a slide that comes up later, but we have nursing. There's other, at one point, athletic training was kind of in this route. Of course, they're on their own now, but there are parallel professions that are within the Commission of Accreditation of Allied Health Education Programs. Another important thing to know about CAAHEP is that they are recognized by CHIA. So that's their kind of checks and balances is CHIA. So the way CAAHEP works is they have a set of standards that all have common elements. And then we as COAs create standards specific to our educational programs and profession. So those discipline-specific requirements that are in line with the CAAHEP standard. So any of those 31 professions all follow the same exact standard outline. And then we have the discipline-specific intricacies worked in. So we all have our own standards and guidelines that have been created. And their standards and guidelines that we then create to be discipline specific are nationally recognized, and those are what are governed and looked over by CHIA. So the COAES, who are we? So we have, let's start with what I would call our at-large members. So this comes up in a little bit as well, but we have three different accreditations, three different standards and guidelines, three different accreditations that we oversee and help facilitate. And so one we call is exercise science, the other is exercise physiology, and the other is personal fitness training. So we have a representative from each of those disciplines that sits on our committee, as well as what we call an administrative representative. So typically we've had in this position someone who's at the dean level or higher representing those interests. We then have our sponsoring organizations. I think a lot of times ACSM gets recognized the most, the quickest and the fastest, but we actually have several others. So we have ACE is one of our sponsoring organizations, NASM. The CSCCA is our latest addition as a sponsoring organization. They joined us last year. The Red Cross, AKTA, NASM's on there twice. They're not supposed to be, sorry. And the NCSF. So those are, every single one of those organizations has a representation and meets with the committee every month. And then we have the executive director, which is me. I hold a non-voting role, and then our CAAHEP liaison. So this is currently the format of our committee. So the COAES is an extension of CAAHEP. So we are not the accreditors, okay? We help and assist and coordinate the accreditation seeking process. So we work with programs on their self-study. We help to coordinate site visits. We do the checks and balances post accreditation. When accreditation is awarded, we formulate accreditation recommendations, but we give those recommendations to CAAHEP, and it is their board who decides on awarding accreditation or not. So through our working with the program, through the different materials that are submitted to the committee, then we will make recommendations based off of that process. So, the big question is why accreditation? There are a number of professions out there that accreditation is involuntary. It is required. In our industry, in our field currently, it is a voluntary accreditation. So it's really the choice of the programs to seek accreditation or not. And one of the reasons we think that's so beneficial, or one of the reasons why we think accreditation is so important, is it really does help to ensure that the education that you are delivering is meeting a certain standard. It helps to decrease the inconsistencies that we see, I think, between programs in terms of the level of education that's being provided. And it's really just ensuring that students are having an education that's providing them with an experience and the necessary preparation to be able to go out and be in the workforce and deliver care and really affect the lives of others. I kind of can get really big, but I mean, that's just who I am. I really feel like this is such an extension of care and meeting the needs of individuals out there, even though this is all the way back at the preparation level. All of that really filters down to changing someone's life and affecting it for the better. That's why I've been in this industry. That's one of the reasons why I've been affiliated with accreditation so long. I just think it's so important that we can really make a difference in the lives of others. So it also helps to establish a workforce development standard that's consistent with other healthcare professions, which is what we've talked about. I think you all know the pains that we are going through and have been going through to get the recognition from others in the healthcare industry that we have a place, and not only have a place, should be reimbursed for those services. And so this is part of that larger picture of gaining that recognition, gaining not only the recognition, but the confidence in our professionals so that we can pave the way for that to happen. And I'm sure a lot of you guys know that we do sit on other groups that are really trying to make those changes occur. And we feel that this is one of those steps that will really help solidify that. And I feel like we've gained ground for sure. And I'm just hopeful that that's really around the corner. So as I said, big picture, accreditation, certification is part of displaying the competence of our professionals. Of course, having continued education is part of that. And then getting to that point of a professional registration and creating referral network, and hopefully one day having reimbursements, which, it's kind of that cycle. If we can get to that point, then we can have more qualified individuals staying within the field and within the industry, and then serving more people, affecting health and life of others. So why accreditation beyond that? Kind of this is just it in a nutshell. It's having an outside quality assurance of your program and the education that you're delivering. It helps to maintain curriculum currency. In terms of the ACSM specific, the two exams specific to ACSM, the EP and the CEP, as you all know, by I think it's August 15th in 2027, they will have a requirement that candidates who sit for those exams, their education must be from an accredited program. So that's why that center little honeycomb is in there, is because for individuals who are going to sit for those exams, that is going to be a requirement in 2027. It helps with marketing programs. So that's another thing, that's an ability for you to say, hey, look, we are delivering a quality education program as recognized by CAAHEP. So it's a really great way to display to the public, and then, to your students and, their parents who are sending their, it's a way to attract those students to your program. It's ensuring a qualified workforce, and it's also protecting the public. So I wanted to share a recent, this just came in, not last week, the week before, from a program who had both their undergraduate and graduate program accredited at the same time. So he went through, which we typically recommend if you're going to do both, you should do them at the same time, because there's a lot of similarities between the self-studies, and a lot of it can be a cut and paste. We can do your review at the same time. It falls under one accreditation fee, or initial accreditation fee. So he went through it with both of his programs. And this was what he said to me in an email. I appreciate everybody that has been involved and assisted us along the way. On a personal and professional note, the accreditation process made my wife a little jealous because of how supportive and informative everybody has been. She doesn't have the same experience with accreditation in her work. As stressful as accreditation visits are, between your responsiveness and the genuine interest shown by our site visitors, this really made the process more inspiring than anything. They had great insight, and it definitely caught the attention of my president and provost as ways to make our programs even more competitive. So I just thought that was really some really special feedback for us to receive and to be able to pass on to others because I do think some have had experience with accreditation in other industries, and I think they take that experience and think that's the way our accreditation is. And there are definitely some differences, which I want to highlight as well. And we really pride ourselves on working with programs. Yes, we're trying to make sure that we are holding programs to a certain standard, but it's not because we want to be governing over programs or think that we know everything. I mean, it really is a collaborative approach to make sure that, again, we are just strengthening the industry, strengthening our professionals, and just making sure we get the recognition we deserve in the healthcare space. So as I mentioned, we have three different accreditations. So personal fitness training, at a minimum, is at the associate's level. This is our smallest number of accreditations. So currently we have 5 programs accredited in personal fitness training, and I think I have 2 right now with self-studies. Most of them are at that associate's level, but there are a couple of bachelor programs who have sought this accreditation as well in that 5. I'd say maybe 2, I think. Um, our undergraduate exercise science accreditation is our largest group of those who are accredited. And there is an optional strength and conditioning add-on. This is a special distinction. So you have to be able to meet the base level of exercise science standards, and then also then in addition meet the strength and conditioning add-ons. I always suggest people take a peek at that requirement because the additional work to reach that distinction is minimal and can be done at the same time as the exercise science. Our strength and conditioning add-on aligns with our 2 sponsoring organizations, NCSF and CSCCA. And you know that they are 2 of the 3 certifying bodies recognized by the NCAA as to providing a qualified certification in the strength and conditioning coaching realm. So I'm trying to spread more on the word on the strength and conditioning add-on because it is a great option and a great distinction with minimal work to add on. Our 3rd level is the graduate level, and that we call exercise physiology. And there are 2 different concentrations to choose from, clinical and applied. We do have some programs who seek both of those concentrations. It is a separate process, so they are considered 2 separate programs. But we do have some programs that have sought both. So I have a couple of schools who have the exercise science and then both exercise physiology distinctions. So they technically have 3 different programs that are accredited. Now, this is a big, I think, misconception out there. So I want to make sure I hit this. The name of your program does not matter in terms of what accreditation you're seeking. We had to name the accreditation something and give them some sort of distinguishing factor. So that's why we said, okay, we're going to call the undergraduate level and this set of standards exercise science. And at the graduate level, we're going to call it exercise physiology with a clinical or applied concentration. I have programs with the title name Human Performance or Health Sciences, or I mean, there's all sorts of names, as you guys know. The name of your program does not matter. And as a matter of fact, CAAHEP is just updating their record system to be able to reflect the actual name of the program. They used to just say the program at University of Connecticut holds the exercise science accreditation. Now they will say the specific program name has the exercise science accreditation or exercise physiology. I mean, we have a number of undergraduate programs that have their program name is exercise physiology. That just distinguishes which accreditation they hold. I hope that helps. I think sometimes people can get a little bit of trepidation or think that because their name doesn't match, then they're not going to be a candidate for, or they think I'm going to have to go through a name change. Our accreditation process does not dictate those minute details. That is really up to the program. And I guess that's what I would like to say about CAAHEP accreditation. I think that's coming up. Well, yeah, here's some of those. Here's some of the things, I think some of the misconceptions out there. And I think part of the reason those are out there is because other accreditation processes do have some of those requirements. So CAAHEP accreditation is what we call an outcome-based accreditation, whereas a lot of other accreditations are a process-based. So while there are certain standards that relate to what you're doing and how you're delivering education, there's a large degree of flexibility that is allowed because we want you are the educators, you are the experts, you know your students, you know your resources, uh, you know your faculty, you know your region, you know your specialties. And so all of that is what makes your program unique. And so we don't want programs to lose their uniqueness. That's important to maintain and protect. It's just that we're making sure that within that uniqueness, you're meeting certain standards. And really, everything that is in the standards and guidelines is to help make sure you're meeting certain outcomes. So really, this is an outcome-based accreditation. So that's that first line. We're an outcome-based accreditation. We don't inhibit academic freedom. Again, that's your specialty. We believe accreditation is pretty straightforward. There's a self-study process. I'm going to go through that in just a minute. Rarely do we request massive changes. Basically, we give you a certain a listing of competencies in terms of if we're talking about curriculum, and you tell us how you're meeting those competencies. So we don't tell you, hey, you have to deliver them in this order. We don't say, hey, you have to have a course that's named this. You just tell us this is how we're covering that competency, which has been established for the profession. And we also like to pride ourselves that we are not an expensive accreditation. We really try to make it affordable. We are not trying to make money off of accreditation, trust me. We just are trying to support the work of accreditation, and that's it. A big question besides the name change question that we get is, do we have to hire additional staff? And the only requirement in terms of staff is that you do have to name a program director. And that program director, it depends on which level of accreditation you're seeking, but they do have specific qualifications that they need to meet. They're not earth-shattering. And we do, in the standards, it is written in a way that that needs to be recognized as a departmental assignment. And the amount of time that is devoted to that is consistent with other departmental assignments in terms of your institutional policy. And so we kind of have some language in there to make sure you are getting the support in terms of time. And that's recognized by upper administration. And that is one of the reasons why we come on site and we meet with upper administration so that we can support you and be a voice for you all as well. Okay, so here is the steps to gain initial accreditation. And 1 and 2, I'm going to say, are kind of fluid. So the first step we have listed is to submit a request for accreditation services on the CAAHEP website. This is an electronic form. You do have to have president sign off on it. So as you're completing the form, you can hit send, and it can be, you put an email address in and who needs to complete filling out the form. So it will save it along the way as you pass it up the chain for the signatures, and then it gets automatically submitted to CAAHEP, and then they communicate that submission to us at the COA level. That typically triggers the release of the self-study. So I will get notified of the submission of, we call it a RAS, and then I will contact the program director there's a spot for you to put who is the program director. And then there's an email. So I will then send kind of the introductory email. Hi, this is how the process works. Here's your self-study documents. And there is a document associated with each of these standards. Okay, so there's several questions for you to dive into to assess your program in terms of the standards for accreditation. Now, CAAHEP likes the RAS to be current within a year from when you are being put forward for consideration for accreditation. Some programs take longer than a year to complete the self-study. Now, that's not because this, yes, the self-study takes some work, but there are some programs who are able to complete it in 2 months. It really partly depends on how much are your things in order, or how much time. I mean, we're all taxed to the max, right? So how much time do you have to give to the documents? So I've had people complete or programs complete the self-study in as little as 2 months. I had a program reach out to me from, and this is not uncommon, they received a RAS 2 years ago. And so we're here no matter how fast or how slow you complete the self-study. The only thing that if too much time has elapsed with the self-study, sometimes we've updated the self-study. So we'll just send you the new documents and you just pretty much copy and paste everything in and then maybe answer some new questions. That doesn't happen terribly frequently, but that is a potential. So what would happen if you submitted a RAS and it took you 2 years? You just submit another one. The other workaround is you can just contact me directly and I will send the self-study documents and you can be working on the self-study documents. And when you're getting ready to submit those, like, oh, they're almost complete, then you can go ahead and complete a RAS. And the reason I would suggest that for some programs is just because I know that it's hard to get a president's signature. And so you might only want to attempt that once and not have to go back and do it again. We are working towards blowing up our current website and starting over. And we will hopefully, I'm going to say within the next 6 months, hopefully, we'll have the self-studies available for a download. So you're not having to reach out to me directly. I know we kind of are still a little antiquated, I would say, but it's just the work of accreditation and helping programs. That is our key priority, and we will, what's the word? Update, come into the current, we are slowly getting there. I'll just say that because we do want to be as supportive for programs as possible. And we know part of that is easily accessing information and not having to send an email to me to send you documents. So we are working on that. But in the meantime, if this is something your program is interested in, and also receipt of the self-study and or completing a RAS does not hold you to accreditation. We do not assess any fees until you are ready to submit your self-study. So let's say you get into working on the self-study and you decide, accreditation isn't for me, or hey, 5 years from now, maybe we'll revisit that. There is no obligation. So if I send you self-study documents, that is your choice whether you want to complete them or not. We would love for you to. We're here to support you and help you get through that. But again, there's no obligation. So there's no fees assessed until you go to submit the self-study and we start planning your in-person visit. I have a slide on fees later, but I might as well talk about it here. The initial accreditation fee currently is $750. So that's when you're ready to submit that self-study. The next step, once you submit the self-study, is we schedule your in-person site visit. And this is where we have 2 site visitors come and there is a schedule of events. It's a day and a half and they meet with various people within the program. They will meet with upper administration. They will meet with students. They'll tour your facilities and they're there to visually assess your program and see how it aligns with what you've reported in your self-study. And actually right there at the very end of your site visit, you will see a report of their assessment of have you complied with all of the different standards in their opinion. Our site visitors all come from programs who themselves have accreditation, and or it might be someone who was at an accredited program. They maybe moved on to another program, but they have had experience in accreditation. And they go through training annually, and they also have to conduct visits. I forget our minimum standard. I think it's like 1 in a year, something like that. we do have standards for our site visitors. But these are individuals who are just, they're passionate about accreditation. It's totally voluntary on their part, but I can tell you the work of accreditation cannot happen without their assistance. I have, I was sending an email saying to site visitors, you guys are the best. And I said, I actually say this about, oh no, I was telling a program director about their two site visitors, but I actually say that about every one of our site visitors. They are just, seriously, I could just go on about them. They are truly so giving of their time and expertise and willing to work with programs, willing to work with me. It's really, I really feel like we have something special in our, with our accreditation and our committee. That in-person site visit, there is no fee associated with the visit. You just need to reimburse the expenses of the site visitors. So that would be airfare. I have two visits that are coming up in the spring where two people volunteered who can drive to. So that cuts down, for instance, when that happens, that's a beautiful thing. We do try to save programs as much money as possible. So it's just reimbursing their expenses. So once they conduct their site visit review, by the way, it usually takes us the scheduling 2 to 3 months to schedule from the time of submitting the self-study to when we can do a visit. We need a bit of time, to secure those visitors for them to find time in their schedule. But we also do a review of your files. And sometimes there's some back and forth needing some additional information. We want to make sure that the visit is going to be as effective as possible. So all that time you spent on the self-study, we truly dig in and look at everything you've reported to us. So we want time to be able to affordably schedule their travel, as well as time to review the files. Once the site visitors give a report, they send that to me, and my chair looks over it. Sometimes we want to meet with programs again, like here's some clarification. We want to make sure that the site visitors understood this appropriately. So there's just a lot of back and forth working. That doesn't happen all the time. It's not necessarily needed all the time, but I just want you to know that there's very few finite things that we do. We do a lot of working with programs. You will then receive your official report, and you'll have 2 weeks to respond to that report in writing. And then we will bring your program to the whole committee to vote on making a recommendation for accreditation. And we do those blind, so our committee does not know the program. All they know about the program is, are they seeking, what level of accreditation they're seeking. So they don't know the size of the program, they don't know the names, you don't know the university. None of that. So that's all done blind. Once we make a recommendation, we will put that forward to CAAHEP, and they make the decision on accreditation. So I was talking about time frames. How long does the self-study take? Depends. That's based on you. Again, this is 30 to 45 days. It's really looking more like 2 to 3 months in reality of how we're doing it. Once we get the report, we take less than, the reason why I have 30 days here is because it depends on when our monthly meeting falls in relation to when your site visit has been completed and we receive the final report. So for instance, I have a site visit taking place Monday, Tuesday. We have a meeting Wednesday. It is very unlikely that we will get that report in time to review at this meeting. So it won't be until the next meeting that we can review. So sometimes people fall on the perfect timing, and then some people fall on like the day before we could have done anything. And so it seems like there's this really long wait. And that's just how it falls. CAAHEP only meets every other month on accreditation decisions. So they made an accreditation decisions in January. They don't meet until, again, March for those decisions. Our committee has to have recommendations to them a month prior to their decision meeting. So for instance, this month, it comes up later. For the March meeting, I have to have programs submitted February 17th for consideration for their March meeting. So some of the times that timing can be a little funky as well. We really try to accelerate things when we see like, oh my gosh, it's close. Let's see if we can, like if you respond within a day instead of the 2 weeks to the report, we'll try to get it as forward as possible. And sometimes we call special meetings of the committee just to review programs because we want to put them forward to CAAHEP timely. The accreditation timeline. So initial accreditation is what is awarded, and that is awarded for 5 years. In those 5 years, when you first seek initial accreditation, no outcome data is required to be reported. During initial accreditation, those 5 years, we are working with programs to start reporting those outcomes and put processes in place. Sometimes there's some tweaking that has to take place, like, oh, we're not meeting the outcome, let's tweak this. So we want to make sure by the end of those 5 years, you're meeting the thresholds for those outcomes. After 5 years, we do another review. It's called the Continuing Accreditation Review. It has some documents associated with it, nothing nearly as intense as the self-study. And currently, we're doing those visits virtually. And they typically occur over a day virtually, still with 2 site visitors, but it's a virtual. If your program's in good standing, if you're meeting the outcomes, we don't feel like we need to be on site. And then the committee will make a decision again on accreditation. This time, does this program have everything in place that we feel comfortable suggesting and recommending continuing accreditation? If CAAHEP awards continuing accreditation, that accreditation lasts 10 years. You do have a requirement annually to complete an annual report where we're continuing to check on the outcomes, but you won't have another review for another 10 years. So here's the review schedule from CAAHEP for 2025. So as you noticed, as I said, February 17th, my recommendations are due for their 21st meeting. And so you can see so on down the line. And this is published on their website under events if you ever want to check on the timing of this. Our meeting is held monthly the Wednesday before these due dates, so that we've timed it so that we can make accreditation decision or recommendations and be able to get them in the system prior to their meeting. The outcomes, these are all standard outcomes that CAAHEP requires. So this is part of that CAAHEP standard. We, as a committee, determine the thresholds and what this looks like. Okay, so there is retention is one of the outcomes, graduate placement, graduate satisfaction, employer satisfaction, culminating experience, and a national credentialing exam. And these are the questions that we ask on an annual report. And here are the thresholds. All right. So we've written out how you would calculate retention, but we're looking at your programmatic retention. Okay. A national credentialing exam, all you need to report is the pass rate. So we don't even say, hey, you have to have this many students sit for a credentialing exam. It's just we want to know what the pass rate is of those students who sit. So let's say you have 1 student who sits for a credentialing exam and they pass. Guess what your pass rate is? 100%. Okay. Graduate placement, it's defined as admittance to a higher level degree program or employment within 1 year of graduation in a related field or in military service. Culminating experience varies by level of accreditation, but that just across the board, the pass rate for that culminating experience is 50%. Graduate satisfaction, we are looking for 50% satisfaction with a return rate of 50%, because we know it's hard to get people to return stuff, but we're looking for that graduate satisfaction of 85%. The employer satisfaction is our hardest outcome to have reported, which makes sense. The students are gone. It's also, there are some states that do not allow you to contact employers. So all that we ask in terms of this outcome, we've changed the threshold on this, is we just want you to attempt to gain some insight on employer satisfaction and report your return rate as well as from if anybody did send anything back, what that level of employer satisfaction is. So we just want you to report what you gather and you know. You report your attempt. Did you have a return rate? And then what was the satisfaction? So there's no actual threshold. It's just more provide us what you find out. In the past, some programs were trying to use a workaround and use employer satisfaction from internship experience, but that's a completely separate thing. So this truly is, yes, they've done their internship. That's different. That falls under culminating experience. This is truly when they've become employed. Okay, so I talked about the accreditation fee as well as the site visit expenditure. Annually, your programs are responsible for a $500 COAES fee, but there's also an institutional fee that's paid to CAAHEP as well. We invoice those at the same time, and so sometimes programs get confused and only pay one because the amounts are so similar that they see them come in at the same time, and it's almost like in their brain they think it's the same fee. It's not. They are two separate fees. Ours comes from COAES, CAAHEP comes from CAAHEP, two different methods of payment. So I just say that up front just to try and cut down on, we're often reaching out to programs saying, hey, you forgot to pay. And failure to remit those payments can lead to administrative probation, either from CAAHEP. So we just don't like that to happen for programs. Continuing accreditation review currently is $550. I will say this, if you do have multiple programs accredited at the same time, those fees fall under one. So the initial accreditation, for instance, if you're having both of your programs reviewed at the same time, it's just that $750 fee. Yes, each program is responsible for an annual fee. So if you have two programs, it's a total of 1,000, right? 500 and 500. But we get you on that same cadence so that when you do your continuing accreditation review, it is also only under one fee as well. So we're doing a continuing accreditation visit of an exercise science and exercise physiology in March, and they fall under just one fee of $550. So again, we tried to make this as affordable as possible, and it's just really time efficient in terms of for you all as well as for us. Time and effort, I would say. The reviews take a little bit longer. Like typically continuing accreditation review, we call a CAR. Typically that's a 1-day review. Depending on how much overlap is between the two programs, it might go to a day and a quarter or a day and a half, depending on who additionally we need to schedule to meet with. But that's it. And usually the site visit, the on-site for the initial is a day and a half. Sometimes it bumps to a day and 3/4 to maybe 2 days, but that's it. Okay, I'm ready for questions.
All right. Thank you, Gina.
I'll stop sharing. How about that? Oh, well, do you want me to leave my email up or stop sharing?
It doesn't matter either way. It's fine.
Okay.
So your email can stay up. It's fine.
Okay.
So first of all, thanks for giving the overview of everything and answering some questions probably that people might have had. But I do want to open it up an opportunity for specific questions that you might have. I don't know everyone's place with the process, if you're in academia, if you're a clinician. So all questions are welcomed. So I can just allow you guys, I mean, you can turn your cameras on, you can raise your hand, or you can type it in the chat. So we're a small group, so we should be able to just do that just fine. So.
Are you saying I did so well, there's no questions?
I mean, even I have questions, but I'm allowing others an opportunity first. So.
Yeah.
Hi, Jeff.
I don't really have a big question other than I'm actually an employer in a cardiac rehab program, and we've gone to requiring the ACSM CEP, within a year of hire. and our local university is really hesitant to undergo the accreditation process, and so we're sort of worried, as it becomes ineligible for people to sit for the CEP exam without graduating from an accredited institution. We have this pipeline university, who three of our programs within a few counties all hire from this one school. Um, so I took this. I'm also working on my PhD and took some accreditation courses here, but so I just took this to kind of get some information. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I do think as much as we've tried to really put forward um, our take on accreditation, and it's not as I think there's a hesitation because I think because of the misconceptions that it is process based, and we're going to tell you how many faculty you have to have, what's the student to faculty ratio, and there are some accreditations like that, and they
Sure.
have a purpose and a reason for that, but that's not this accreditation. um, and it is an outcome-based accreditation, and we are very friendly and want to work with programs and don't view ourselves as the expert. We're just in partnership with programs to make sure we're all on the same page of delivering, quality education and preparing our professionals adequately. So if you ever get a chance to talk to any of those programs, send them my way. I think a conversation really helps to break down some of the barriers that are out there.
Okay, I might do that. They're
Yeah.
they're receptive, and they seemed, I've talked with one of the program coordinators, and he seems to understand where we're coming from as an employer. I'm also an outsider trying to get them to, trying to
Yeah.
just telling them this is what they need to do. So it's, I'm definitely trying to phrase it in a cooperative, frame of mind that we're here to help each other, but we're not willing to decrease that requirement for employment. So that we need to figure out how we can get that going.
Well, anytime you need some help or some slides that might help, or if I can talk to, administration, or even our chair always jumps in and talks to people as well.
Cool.
Just let me know. We're here to
All right.
help.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm gonna add a follow-up. Jeff, I think it's actually reassuring hearing from employers that it is being increasingly becoming a requirement. Because coming from being with an institution that is going through the process, it takes a lot of buy-in from the leadership in your institution to warrant the accreditation. If employers aren't standardly requiring this specific credential, what's the need, right, for us to require this? So I appreciate you sharing that it is something that your organization deems as not just optimal but required. And I'm hoping that continues to take more over the more common than not. So I'm going to sorry, you unmuted, so go ahead, Jeff, and then I'm
I
going
was
to
going to say, I agree.
ask.
That's it.
Okay. So that being said, Gina, other people, please type in questions as you have them. We have a few more minutes, but I was curious as to what other advice you might have for program coordinators and directors or people like trying to get the support from leadership to pursue accreditation.
Well, I mean, I think just painting the picture in the case of wanting to, I think, well, first of all, I think that slide that talks about all of the different benefits of accreditation, really, if we want to view our profession as a strong profession, as a qualified healthcare profession, and gain more momentum in and have a greater space, right? There is so much potential out there. We need to be able to grow into that potential. And part of that is getting others to recognize us as quality healthcare. And part of that is this assurance that, yeah, there are standards in place. That this isn't just some willy-nilly field that people just pop into. Like, there are standards, there are guidelines, and we are truly preparing these students adequately so that they can be qualified individuals in the field. I can just say, I know on a lot of our work that we're doing in terms of getting that reimbursement, I mean, we're working on getting codes. And a big part of that is showing that we have a parallel process to other healthcare providers out there. And I think that's one of the big pushes. I think it's a really big push, because if we need to be able to support our professionals, I mean, how many people go into the field and then exit because there's not the support? So until it's like you have to start here in order to make it bigger here. I do like to provide, I do like to talk to administration because I think when they hear a person be able to explain it, I think that's a big thing. I do send my slides often because there's nothing proprietary here. So I think that sometimes helps. I've sat in on departmental meetings where everyone is in the room. So does that help? I mean,
It
I think
it
that's
does. And I know we're working on having more from just the EPA itself, like resources and tools and collaborating with each other, like those who have gone through this process are successfully accredited programs and those pursuing or those on the fence and not sure, if that's the best decision for their program. But having all those resources, using them, and then the collaboration with each other and then leaders
yeah.
within COAs, I think is critical.
Well, I think it's just short-sighted it's just if we stay where we're at, you know what I mean? Like we need to grow. And I think I do think a big part is because people think that we're going to come in and change the education that's being delivered or make them do certain things, but that is not at all what we're here for. We just want to make sure that there are certain processes and standards in place,
Mhm.
and that those students are being serviced appropriately. And I think we should all want to do that. I mean, at the end of the day, that's really going to strengthen your program and make it more sought out, you know.
Sure.
Everyone is now looking at, I mean, I'm a parent, I told you I have a 16-year-old, so we're starting to look at schools for him. And the big thing too is you think about like ROI, is their education going to serve them? Are they going to be able to go do something, you know? And I think that's a big part of accreditation for our industry.
Employability is definitely
Yeah.
important for your program to be able to offer your students for sure. Does anyone have any questions? We have just like a minute or two before we're gonna wrap up, so everyone could have a couple minutes before they re-enter the main room. Remember, you have to exit here and then get back on GoToWebinar. Yep.
I also
Go
have a
ahead, Leo.
comment to add. And hi, Jeff. Yes, it is me from Island Hospital. I was a student into a master's program at a university that wasn't accredited. And I was looking at the job descriptions in my area. Jeff is an employer. He is from my area. I know him, and specifically states there, right? The ACSF is
Hi,
a
Leo.
requirement. Hi, Jeff. And then I started looking at why is my current university not accredited, and how does that can be impactful in the future? And I made a decision to switch universities to go to our accredited program, and I did that. I finished my graduate program at an accredited university, um, and then looking back now and looking in towards the future now, at the current site that I'm working now. We just took administrative positions right now, and it is being led by clinical exercise physiologists. And we are implementing the same. We actually used your hiring as sort of a template, Jeff. So thank you for that. For ourselves as well, which includes the CEP accreditation. Because we are a university, we do have students shadowing our cardiac rehab or stress testing departments. So we are working with students collaborative. And one of the topics that we're constantly mentioning to these students is like we do understand that the university you guys are coming from is not accredited, and you guys need to be prepared for that in the future. So right now, because they still got a little leeway of 2 years, get your CEP, right? Because in the future that might be a barrier for you. And as the employers, we don't want to change that. We want to keep that. We want to enforce that rule. So it is very important. Kind of the same with Jeff. We have contacted these universities. We have mentioned them. I have given them contact about and explained the whole situation. And we're just basically waiting on them to start the process going in there as well.
That's exciting for me to hear because I'm on this side of it. But to hear that the employers are understand the importance, which is, we always say, we know that, but then to actually hear you guys say it, it's we appreciate that greatly.
I agree. Reassuring to hear that. So we just need to compile all of this together. So we are out of time for our session today. But thank you all. Thank you, Gina, for coming and giving us this wonderful presentation and discussion. Thank you guys for your participation and your contributions during this session. If you have additional questions, Gina has left her email graciously here for you to follow up. And any of the other individuals on this call as well, if you're hoping to collaborate with institutions. Hopefully everybody's willing to do so. I know I am. So thank you, and I will see you all in the other room.
Thank you guys. Have a good conference.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks for your
Bye.
time.
Thank you guys.